Hello everyone, this is MC Deck Discussions and I'm AbisMal, and today we have another 2-deck comparison video, but this one's a little different, so it has a little bit of setup to mention. So first of all, I want you to notice this part right here at the top that says randomized 4-pack challenge. So Solo Marvel Champion put together a video, but also a spreadsheet that randomizes packs. So I want to show you what he did real quickly and refer you to his video. I'll have his video linked so that you can check it out yourself. But let's take a look. So here's the video, and like I said, I'll have it linked. I can't remember what the title of it is right now, but this was in order to create a 4-pack challenge, both for himself, but also for me to create a deck from. So he created this spreadsheet that had a randomizer, and we would be allowed to use the core set plus 4 randomly, or at least somewhat randomly. It's narrowed down really nicely the way he designed this. And so there were 4 other packs that were allowed. So what would happen is this randomizer would choose a campaign box. In this case, it chose Sinister Motives. And then it would randomly choose a hero from that wave. And in this case, it would choose SPDR or Spider, and then it would choose a hero from the previous wave, a pack from the previous wave, which would be Vision, and then it would choose a pack from the next wave after Sinister Motives, which was, in this case, was Gambit. So the campaign box, Sinister Motives, plus these 3 packs. So 1 pack from the current wave, Spider, 1 from the previous wave, Vision, 1 from the next wave, Gambit. So this ended up being a pretty cool selection. So then after that, we could choose any aspect we wanted and then just build a deck, narrow down using just those as those packs as our resources for the cards. So with that in mind, let's go check out the decks that we each created. All right, so let's start with the allies here. We chose exactly the same allies, except that I added Nick Fury to my deck. By the way, both decks have 41 cards. So this one's my deck called Ghost in the Med Team. And like I said, so I have 9 allies, he has 8, and they're identical. So we chose a lot of Web Warriors because the main character is Ghost Spider. Ghost Spider is a Web Warrior, so we both went with Web Warrior builds, which does mean we both have the Web of Life and Destiny in our deck. So critical card in here, right? So it's a 3-cost support. However, it ignores this card's resource cost if your identity has the Web Warrior trait. So that's awesome. You get to just put it out there right away with no cost. And then it has this response: after a Web Warrior ally leaves play, choose a player. That player draws 1 card. And for those who may not have played with this, notice you do not have to exhaust this card. So you can have multiple Web Warriors leave play in a particular turn and draw a card for each one that leaves play. So this ends up being a really powerful card for card draw. In addition to that, Ghost Spider has her own card draw cards that are critical. So I want to make sure to mention those right away. So that she has her upgrades here. 2 copies of Web Bracelet. So it's a 2-cost upgrade. It's an item and it's tech, and it has this hero response: after you resolve an interrupt or responsibility on an event, exhaust Web Bracelet, draw 1 card. So that means that you want to have plenty of event cards that have interrupts or responses in them, because then you're able to exhaust this and draw a card. Notice it's max 1 per event. So even though there are 2 copies of this card, for a particular event, you can only exhaust 1 of them, and then it would have to be another event to exhaust the other and get the other card draw. So you can't just, when I first started playing this, I didn't realize that was the case years ago when this deck came out, and I would draw both cards right away. I didn't realize, it has to be separate events. So it took me a little while to realize that. So I thought I'd point it out in case anybody else either hasn't played this or didn't realize that's the case. Okay. All right, so let's point out what those allies are overall, other than Nick Fury. So like I said, these other 8, we all have the same. So I'll mention Jocasta in a little bit. Let's start with all the rest of these are Web Warriors. So we have Silk, who's a Web Warrior, 2-cost ally. After you play Silk from your hand, if you control another Web Warrior card, search the encounter deck for a Treachery and discard it. And of course, since we have Ghost Spider as the is Web Warrior, so automatically you're going to be able to use this response. So a very cool response. Okay. And then we also have, notice there are 4 copies of Spider-Man here. So one of them is Spider-Man Miles Morales, a 4-cost card. Web Warrior traded 2 attack, 1 thwart, and has this response: after you play Spider-Man from your hand, stun and confuse an enemy if you control at least 3 Web Warrior cards. So you do need to make sure that you have not just, so Ghost Spider is one of them, Spider-Man himself is another one, Miles Morales, but then you either have to have one of these other cards, or Web of Life and Destiny would also count for that. Okay. And then, oh, by the way, as you can see, I went with protection. So did so did Solo Marvel Champion. They also went with protection. So we both went with protection, and it was the obvious choice to both of us. It seemed obvious because it just so happened with these packs, they had a lot of these cards, these event cards, that had interrupts and responses, so that we could take advantage of, you know, the key cards and of Ghost Spider. Speaking of which, I should probably mention this before I go over the rest of these. Looking at Ghost Spider herself, so looking at her hero side, she has this ability. Oh, so first of all, she has 10 hit points, a hand size of 5 on this side, on her hero side, a hand size of 6 on her alter ego side. And she has this ability on her hero side, dizzying reflexes, a response. This is the other major reason, even a bigger reason in my mind, that you want to have interrupt and response events in your deck. And that is, it has this response, which is after you resolve an interrupt or responsibility on an event, ready Ghost Spider. It's a limit once per phase, but that does mean you get to do it both when it's your turn and also when it's the villain's turn. So being able to ready her regularly is very cool and very powerful. She does have, for her thwart is only 1, so that is something that you have to really try to build into the deck, is handling the thwart. Her attack is 2, and she has a defense of 3. All right, so going back to her allies here, so we already mentioned this Spider-Man. Then we also have Spider-Man Hobie Brown, so 3-cost card, and another Web Warrior, and you can only play him if you have a Web Warrior card, control Web Warrior card. Interrupt: when Spider-Man leaves play, discard the top 3 cards of the encounter deck. Deal damage to the villain equal to the number of boost icons discarded this way. So the goal with this card is very much get it out there, do some thwarting usually, although I ended up using it for attacking here and there. And then you typically end up then, I mean, you could, you know, keep him around and then attack again on the next turn, and then he would leave play, and this ability would trigger. But a lot of times you'll end up defending with him, and then he will do discard top 3 cards in the encounter deck, and do anywhere from, I mean, he could do 0 if there are none of these boost icons. He could actually do 0 damage in those 3 cards. The practicality is typically he'll do anywhere from a couple of points of damage all the way up to maybe 6, 7, or 8 points of damage. So it may be pretty random, but it's still a pretty great ability, and especially when it hits hard. And I had it when I was playing it. It works both ways. Sometimes it hit hard, sometimes it hit for just a couple of points. And then we also have Spider-Man Peter Parker, who is a Web Warrior, has this requirement to play, which is you must pay with an energy, a mental, and a physical resource when paying for this card. So once you spend those listed resources, then you can get Spider-Man Peter Parker out in play, and has this response: after Spider-Man attacks or thwarts, choose another Web Warrior character and ready that character. And typically you would choose Ghost Spider to ready to be able to activate again. And then we also have Spider-Man Otto Octavius, who has the Web Warrior trait, has 1 thwart and 2 attack with 2 consequential damage and only 2 hit points. So if you use the attack right away, then Otto Octavius leaves play immediately. But he has this awesome response, especially great for Ghost Spider, and that is after you play Spider-Man from your hand, ready an upgrade you control. If that upgrade has the tech trait, draw 1 card. And if we go back to these web bracelets, those were the upgrades that you would want to target, and they are tech upgrades. So not only do you get to ready them so they're available again, but as soon as you play Spider-Man Otto Octavius, you would get to draw a card because those cards have a tech upgrade. In addition, we have one more extremely powerful web warrior, and that is Spider UK. Has 2 attack with 2 consequential damage, 1 thwart with 1 consequential damage, and 5 hit points, and has this interrupt, and this is what makes Spider UK extremely powerful. When Spider UK defends against an attack, deal damage to the attacking enemy equal to the number of web warrior cards you control. So even if it's just Spider UK and Ghost Spider, then he can do 2 damage, but as soon as you have Web of Life and Destiny in play, that's 3 damage. And of course, if you have 1 or 2 more, that can be 4 damage or even up to 5 damage. And here's what makes this so powerful. So this is a minion eliminator. So what you'll do on your own turn is typically do enough damage to the minion if necessary so that Spider UK can finish them. This is an interrupt. It occurs before the minion gets a chance to actually deal their damage in their attack. So when the minion starts its attack, and you can do this against the villain too, and I have actually ended a game. One of the games in the 2 decks, I actually ended a game where Spider UK defended and just ended the game immediately against the villain. But usually you save Spider UK for the minions, and when he defends, he just destroys the minion outright, and then the minion never gets a chance to deal their damage. So it's a really cool card, has 5 hit points, so that's great. So when you do need to thwart or you need to attack, he can still contribute in that way, especially when he first comes out. Once you use him on defense, then he won't be able to attack or thwart in the next turn. But you tend not to use him for defense every round, just mainly when minions are out or if you're trying to finish the game. All right, so those are the allies, and like I said, the allies were the same in both decks. I just added Nick Fury. So here's where the big differences occur. So first of all, I'm going to go to the supports because that's just easier to notice. Both of us had Web of Life and Destiny. My deck added 2 med teams, and I'll show you the other deck when we get to the events, because that's where the big difference is as well, or other big differences are. So I added med team, 2 copies of this. It's a 3 cost support, and it has 3 uses, 3 medical counters on it. And it has this action, exhaust med team and remove 1 medical counter from it, heal 2 damage from a friendly character. While I could use that for Ghost Spider, most of the time my goal was to use that to keep Spider-Man, not that Spider-Man. Here we go, Spider-Man Peter Parker in play, to continually have this 2 thwart and 2 attack available, and to continually be able to use this response. So after he attacks or thwarts, choose another web warrior character, ready that character. So doing that every single turn, again and again, that was the key element of having med team out. Although I did use med team here and there to keep Spider UK in play. So if I wanted to continue to use Spider UK for his 2 attack or his 1 thwart, then doing some healing could do some good. And especially once you start playing some characters that will do random damage to your allies and heroes, then it's kind of nice to have that buffer. All right, so that's the difference there. So the supports, both of us had Web of Life and Destiny, but mine included the 2 med teams. And then the events is where the other major difference is, and these decks do play quite differently from each other. So let's look at the event. So first of all, mine has 20 events. And one of the key events in mine that is not in the other deck, that is Across the Spider-Verse. So this has a hero action, exhaust a web warrior card you control, search your discard pile for a web warrior ally and put it into play, then choose a player. That player may spend 3 resources of any type to repeat this ability. Typically, I almost never get a chance to do it a second time. But the most frequent ally that I tended to use, the web warrior ally that I tended to use to get into play, was Spider-Man Peter Parker, both because of how powerful Spider-Man Peter Parker is, but also because I could avoid this requirement by using Across the Spider-Verse, and so not have to pay 3 different resource types to get him into play. Okay. All right, then let's look at the rest of the events, and then I want to go over to the other deck so you can see the differences in the events. So I included 3 Defiance events. So these are hero interrupts. When a boost card on an enemy is attacking you would return face up, you just discard it. Very powerful ability and 0 cost. 3 Jump Flips has this hero interrupt, and it's a defense event. When you would take any amount of damage, prevent 2 of that damage. If you paid for this card using an energy resource, remove 2 threat from the main scheme. So, and I want to mention right up front, so those 6 events, those are the 6 events we both added, but from there, everything else is different. So I had Across the Spider-Verse. The other Solo Marvel Champions deck did not. And then I also added 2 Thwip Thwips. Okay. So notice this one is not. So I really only have 6 of these cards that add a hero interrupt to them. In addition to the ones that already exist in her deck, she has quite a few in her own deck. But then I added Thwip Thwip, deal 1 damage to a web warrior character you control, place a total of 2 stun status cards on up to 2 enemies. And this can be very powerful because it also can work against those enemies who have not stalwart, but what's that other one called? Steady. So if a villain has steady, then 2 stun status cards will still stun that villain. So I included those for that reason, but also to be able to stun a couple of an extra, the villain and maybe the minion, a minion as well. So that was another possibility. Okay. And I'm just going to mention this up front since we both had this in common too, which was the power of protection. So both of us included 2 of these that double the number of resources this card generates when paying for a protection card, a green card. Okay. So let's go now to check out the differences in the events. Again, the only events we had in common were the 3 Defiance events and the 3 Jump Flip events. So let's go over to the other deck. All right, so here's a Solo Marvel Champions deck, and like I said, here are those other differences now. First of all, I want to point this one out. So Spider Tingle was removed. So in the description, it will say to go ahead and remove that. So Solo Marvel Champion didn't actually get a chance to test his own deck, their own deck prior to me playing it, and so I played it against Claw first. So by the way, those in the testing, there were 3 villains that the deck was tested against. So there was Claw, and then there was Taskmaster, and then there was Magneto. All of them in standard, and then expert. And so when I was starting to play test Ghost Spider, I discovered that Spider Tingle was above what was really needed. So what Spider Tingle does, by the way, it has this interrupt. When you would reveal an encounter card, deal 1 damage to a web warrior character you control. If that card is a treachery, cancel its when revealed effects and discard Spider Tingle, which is very powerful, but you do have to take a damage and you're just guessing ahead of time. So what Solo Marvel Champion decided to do instead, because he's never had a chance to play this, is he's going to save it so when he plays Spider-Ham, because this is very powerful in a Spider-Ham deck. So he's going to save it for then. So those 2 cards are actually not in the deck. So if you see this deck and try it out, realize he has comments in here that'll say to remove the 2 copies of Spider Tingle. And of course, I'll link both decks in the description. All right, so with that in mind, there are really only 41 cards because these 2 copies of Spider Tingle are not in the deck. So here are the cards. So once again, I mentioned that the 3 copies of Defiance and 3 copies of Jump Flip are in both of our decks, and then then he added 6 more cards that have either responses or interrupts in them. So 3 counter punches. After your hero defends against an enemy attack, deal damage to that enemy equal to your hero's attack. So that's 2 damage because the hero Ghost Spider has 2 attack. So 3 copies of that, and then 3 copies of Sidestep. So it has this hero interrupt. When you would take any amount of damage, prevent 3 of that damage. if you paid for this card using an energy resource, deal 1 damage to that enemy. So let's go ahead and talk about what the differences made when I actually played played these decks. So I played mine as usual first because I want to be really familiar with the villains and all of the cards of the hero prior to using somebody else's deck. And so let's go ahead and go back to my deck real quickly because I do want to finish with this deck. I actually had more fun with this deck, so I don't usually say that up front, but because I have a lot of fun had a lot of fun with both decks, but I actually had more fun with this one, so I want to talk about that at the end. All right, so the differences in the playstyle of these decks is, first of all, again, mentioning Med Team and wanting to keep Spider-Man Peter Parker out in play regularly, and using Med Team for whatever else I needed to as well. Okay? And so, like I said, this is a fun deck. In the play testing, both decks actually had the same results. We beat Claw in Standard and Expert. We beat Taskmaster in Standard and Expert, and then beat Magneto in Standard and lost in Expert. And I would say, so that loss in Expert, like I felt like I was never really going to win with my deck in Expert. That wasn't the same with the other deck. And I felt like if I could have had Night Nurse available, which is not available in this 4-pack challenge, then that could have, because there were just a barrage of stuns and confusions, and I just couldn't keep up with that. It was like, I couldn't do anything. Like you have to be able to, if you're going to be able to ready Ghost Spider, you have to have thwarted or attacked in the first place. And I was just constantly stunned and confused. And if I had Night Nurse available, then I would be able to heal a damage from Ghost Spider and then discard a status card. So be able to still activate. So if you have Night Nurse available, I would highly recommend adding Night Nurse to this deck in order to kind of compensate for that, especially if you're playing a villain that does stun and confuse regularly. Might not be necessary otherwise. Okay. In addition, though, I did regularly stun the enemies with Thwip Thwip, so that was really nice being able to do that, and so it allowed me to have quite a bit of control in most of the games. Though, like I said, so this deck is, like I said, a fun deck, but an Expert Magneto really felt out of reach with this particular deck, at least if you didn't have Night Nurse to kind of counter some things. Okay? But just being able to constantly have these Web Warriors out, being able to draw cards because of the Web of Life and Destiny, being able to draw cards because of the Web Bracelets with the interrupts and responses, a lot of fun. However, I only had these 6 extra responses and interrupts. And so I did feel like there were times when I was a little bit limited when I was on defense and not getting to ready Ghost Spider as much as I would have liked to. And that's where the other deck ended up becoming more fun to me. So if we go back over to the other deck. So with this deck, we have 23 events altogether, but 3, 6, 9, 12 extra events in addition to her own events that have, there are some great, very powerful cards that have either responses or interrupts. But having these extra 12 cards with interrupts meant that whenever I was on defense, which tended to be the biggest need, I was able to defend and that apply this 3 defense and then ready Ghost Spider to then be ready to attack on her turn. So that really felt like that was a major difference. And when I faced, so this was pretty cool. So in the battles against, Taskmaster, I never flipped down to Alter Ego a single time in Standard or Expert. I stayed in the hero version the entire time and was able to just constantly be readying and using her abilities. And this Counterpunch was a pleasant surprise. So not only does Counterpunch let you do 2 damage to the attacking enemy, which was usually the villain, so you're constantly kind of doing a little bit of damage and gradually bringing the villain's hit points down, but this took care of all of those. This took care of all of those tough cards that would appear. So that was beneficial against any of the enemies, but especially against Magneto. So when I talked about that, I felt like this deck actually had a chance against Expert Magneto. I only lost against Expert Magneto because he put that wrapped in metal card on Ghost Spider just as she was about to win. Like, she would have won in the very next turn, but wrapped in metal wrapped her up. She couldn't activate. She had unluckily didn't have any allies to bring out. And then just the game ended on the next turn. But without that card being placed on her, she would have won in the very next turn against Magneto in Expert. And so this deck, feeling like it had constant ability to get Ghost Spider ready and counterpunch, was really cool, getting rid of those tough status cards. So in any case, I did still think both decks were fun, but I did feel like I was always able to do something with this particular deck. So I do have to make more of a recommendation for trying this deck. I do think one addition could have been nice in this deck, and that was the one card that I mentioned. Let me go back to that one card. So if you're going to play this deck, right, again, it doesn't have Spider Tingle, so it only has 41 cards. I would recommend adding one extra card. Okay, so back on my deck here. So that one extra card is Across the Spider-Verse. So just such a great card to get back some of those Web Warrior allies, and especially Spider-Man, Peter Parker, but also Spider UK. Spider UK was like an all-star in both decks, and so getting back either of those cards, extremely valuable. So that's it. If you enjoy this type of content, please like and subscribe, and please make comments. Love to hear what people have to say and love replying to that. And everybody have a good one.